You've stood there, haven't you, staring at that brown patch by the front step, a bag of fertilizer in your hand that costs more than your weekly groceries? You've watered, you've sprayed, you've raked until your lower back screamed, and the grass still looks tired and thin. I did all of that for nearly 30 years. Then I learned something from an old Japanese farmer that turned everything I believed upside down. A green, soft, living lawn with no fertilizer, no sprinklers, and no chemicals at all, because the Japanese never fought their soil the way we do. They fed it, and then they got out of the way. I want to be honest with you before we go one step further. The first time I knelt down in a garden outside Kyoto and pressed my hand into the ground, it was cool and springy and alive, and my own lawn back home felt like a parking lot by comparison. That moment has stayed with me for years. What I'm about to share comes from a farmer named Masanobu Fukuoka and a book he published in 1975, along with a temple garden in Kyoto that has stayed green since the year 1339. And I promise you this works even if you're older, even if your knees ache, even if your lawn looks like it died 2 summers ago and never came back. So let me start with the mistake. The same mistake I made every spring for 3 decades without once questioning it. I believed the lawn was something you had to feed. I believed it was hungry, and that if I didn't pour something onto it from a bag or a bottle, it would starve and turn brown and shame me in front of the neighbors. That belief cost me hundreds of dollars a year, and it never once gave me the lawn I wanted. Here is what I didn't understand. A healthy lawn is not fed from the top. It is fed from below, by the soil itself, by a living world of roots and tiny creatures we never see. When I traveled through Japan and spent time in ordinary households and old gardens, I noticed something strange. Nobody was dragging out heavy spreaders. Nobody was spraying anything. The grass was simply there, low and green and content, and it had been there for longer than anyone living could remember. The grass they use is part of the secret. It's called zoysia, and in Japanese it's known as shibafu. It grows close to the ground, sends out runners, and forms a dense mat so thick that weeds can barely push through. It's native to Japan, Korea, and parts of China, and it evolved in a climate of hot summers and long dry spells. That means it learned, over thousands of years, to survive without anyone watering it every evening. When the weather turns dry, it simply slows down and waits. It doesn't die, it rests. And the moment the rain returns, it greens up again like nothing happened. I remember the first time someone explained this to me, I felt a little foolish. For 30 years, I'd been forcing a thirsty kind of grass to live in conditions it hated, and then blaming myself when it failed. The grass wasn't the problem. The whole approach was the problem. But the grass is only the beginning, and honestly, it's the smaller half of the story. Because even the right grass will struggle in dead soil, and most of our soil is dead. So the real question became, why is our soil dead in the first place, and how did the Japanese keep theirs so alive? And that question led me somewhere I did not expect. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. But before I show you exactly what I found, I want to share something that helped me put all of this together in one place. I spent years gathering these methods from old farmers, temple keepers, and the writings of Fukuoka himself, and I eventually put everything into a guide called the Japanese Home Method. It walks you through every step, from choosing the right grass to making your first clay seed balls in plain language you can follow at any age. If you want to go deeper than what I can cover here, the full guide is linked in the description below, and honestly, at $97, it costs less than a single season of fertilizer that was working against you the whole time. Everything I'm sharing with you today is in there, laid out step by step, so nothing gets lost. Now, with that in mind, let me tell you what I found, because it made me angry, and I think it might make you angry too. For most of human history, people understood that a lawn or a meadow took care of itself if you let it. Clover grew right alongside the grass. Wildflowers came and went. Fallen leaves rotted down and fed the roots. The ground built its own richness, year after year, for free. And then something changed, and it changed fast. In the 1950s, after the Second World War, the chemical factories that had been making materials for the war needed something new to sell. So they turned to our yards, they sold us a brand new idea, an idea that had never existed before in all of human history. They told us a lawn should be a single kind of grass and nothing else. They told us that clover, the very plant that had kept lawns green and healthy for centuries, was now a weed. Think about that. Clover pulls nitrogen out of the air and feeds it straight into the soil. It is a free, living fertilizer that grows on its own. And they convinced an entire generation that it was a problem to be killed. Why would they do that? Because the new weed killers they wanted to sell couldn't tell the difference between clover and a dandelion. The chemicals killed both. So instead of admitting their product destroyed a beneficial plant, they simply rebranded that plant as an enemy. Suddenly clover was ugly. Suddenly clover was shameful. And once the clover was gone, the soil lost its free source of nitrogen, which meant you now had to buy nitrogen in a bag every single year from the very same companies. Do you see the trap? They sold you the poison, and then they sold you the cure for the problem the poison created. I think about all the money I handed over without ever asking who decided clover was bad. I never questioned it. My mother never questioned it. We inherited a rule that was invented in a boardroom, and we treated it like it came down from the heavens. The Japanese never fell for this, and that's what fascinated me. Their tradition of working with the land was hundreds of years old and far too deep to be rewritten by an advertising campaign. They had centuries of practice in something far wiser, and it was all built on one simple idea that we forgot. The idea is this: you do not feed the plant, you feed the soil, and the soil feeds the plant. Everything I'm going to show you comes back to that single sentence. So let me take you underground, because this is where the real magic lives, and almost nobody talks about it. Beneath every healthy lawn, there is a hidden city. In 1 teaspoon of living soil, there can be more microscopic creatures than there are people on the entire planet. Billions of them. Tiny fungi stretch out like threads weaving through the dirt, connecting to the roots of your grass. These threads act like an extended root system, reaching far out into the ground to gather water and minerals. And then they deliver all of it straight to your grass in exchange for a little sugar the plant makes from sunlight. It's a trade. It's a partnership older than the dinosaurs. Now, here's the heartbreak. Every time you dump synthetic fertilizer on your lawn, you damage that partnership. The grass gets a quick hit of chemical nitrogen, so it stops sending sugar down to the fungi because it no longer needs them, and the fungi, no longer fed, begin to die off. The living network collapses. So next year, the grass is even more dependent on the bag because its real support system underground is gone. That's why your lawn always seems to need more, never less. You aren't building health. You're building addiction. This is exactly what Masanobu Fukuoka understood, and he understood it long before any university confirmed it. Fukuoka was born in 1913 and trained as a plant scientist, a microbiologist who studied plant diseases in a laboratory. He had a respectable job and a modern education. Then one morning as a young man, he had a realization that struck him so hard he walked away from his entire career. He realized that nature did not need to be improved by humans. It needed to be left alone and trusted. He returned to his family farm on the island of Shikoku, and he spent the next 50 years developing what he called natural farming. He had 4 rules, and when I first read them, they sounded almost too simple to be real. No plowing, no chemical fertilizer, no weeding by tilling, no pesticides. He did almost nothing, and his fields produced as much rice and grain as the modern farms around him that used every machine and chemical available. His soil got richer every single year, while theirs got poorer. He published all of this in 1975 in a book called The One Straw Revolution. It became known around the world, and yet here we are, almost 50 years later, still spraying and bagging and watering our lawns to death because the simple truth never made anyone any money. You can't put a patent on doing less. You can't sell a product called nothing. When I read Fukuoka's words, I felt like someone had finally told me the truth after a lifetime of being sold lies. He wrote that the more people do, the more they think they have to do, and the further they get from the natural way. I read that line 3 times. It described my whole approach to my yard and honestly my whole approach to a lot of things in life. But I know what you might be thinking right now, because I thought it too. You might be thinking, this is fine for a farmer with 50 years and acres of land, but my lawn is already a mess. It's patchy and hard and half dead. Some of it is just bare dirt. I'm in my 60s or my 70s. My back doesn't bend the way it used to, and I can't be out there crawling around for hours. You might be thinking it's simply too late for you and your tired little lawn. I want to stop right here because this next part is for you especially. This is for anyone who looks out the window and feels like the damage is already done. It is not too late. I need you to hear me. Soil is not like a broken machine that can never be fixed. Soil is alive, and living things heal when you stop hurting them. I have watched lawns that look completely dead come back to soft green life in a single season with no digging, no machines, and almost no money spent. The ground wants to heal. It has been trying to heal the whole time. All you have to do is stop standing in its way. So let me give you the very first thing you can do today, this afternoon, with no equipment and no expense at all. Stop bagging your grass clippings. That's it. When you mow, let the clippings fall right back onto the lawn. For years, I caught every clipping in a bag and hauled it to the curb, and I was throwing away the best free fertilizer on earth. Grass clippings are nearly all water and nitrogen. When they break down, they feed the soil exactly what it needs, the way fallen leaves feed a forest floor. They will not cause thatch. That's another old myth. They disappear in a few days and hand their goodness straight back to the roots. The second thing you can do costs nothing either. Raise the blade on your mower. Most of us cut far too short, scalping the lawn down to the dirt because we think it looks tidy. But short grass has short roots, and short roots dry out fast and let weeds move in. Let your grass grow taller, around 3 inches, and something quiet and wonderful happens. The taller blades shade the soil and keep it cool and damp. The roots grow deeper, reaching down for water you never have to provide. The shade chokes out weed seeds before they can sprout. You stop mowing so often, you stop watering so much, you do less and the lawn does more. That is the whole Japanese idea in a single act you can do this weekend. I want you to notice how this feels different from everything you've been told. Nobody is asking you to buy anything. Nobody is asking you to work harder. You are being asked to do less and trust more, and I know that goes against every instinct we were trained to have. But this is how the ground actually works, and it always has. Now, leaving your clippings and raising your blade will start the healing. But there is one more piece, and this is the piece that pulls everything together, the piece I promised you at the very beginning. This is the part that almost got lost, the part the chemical companies could never sell, the part that Fukuoka kept alive on his hillside in Shikoku while the rest of the world forgot. This is the method that lets a tired patch of bare dirt become a soft green carpet with no plowing and no machinery at all. Let me tell you how I found it. Buried in Fukuoka's writing, almost as an aside, was a technique so old it goes back to ancient farming and so simple that modern agriculture laughed it out of the room. It's called nendo dango in Japanese. In English, we'd call it a clay seed ball. And once you understand it, you will never look at a bare patch of earth the same way again. Here is the problem it solves. When you scatter seed onto bare ground the ordinary way, most of it never grows. The birds eat it, the wind blows it away, the sun bakes it, the rain washes it into a pile. You buy an expensive bag of seed, and maybe 1 in 10 ever becomes a plant, which is why we're told we have to till the soil first and rake it and cover it and water it twice a day. All that back-breaking work exists only to protect the seed long enough to sprout. Fukuoka found a better way, and it had been used in old Japan and ancient Egypt and other places for thousands of years before anyone owned a tractor. You take your seed and you coat it inside a little ball of clay. The clay is the armor. The bird cannot eat the seed because it cannot see it and cannot crack it. The wind cannot move it because the clay is heavy. The sun cannot bake it because the clay holds moisture inside like a tiny clay pot. And the seed simply waits, safe inside its shell, until enough rain comes to soften the clay. Then, and only then, when the conditions are truly right for it to live, the seed sprouts from inside, already protected, already nestled into a little pocket of mineral-rich clay that feeds its first roots. You don't dig, you don't till, you don't water. You make the balls, you scatter them on the bare ground, and you let the sky do the rest. Nature decides the timing, and nature is never wrong about it. Let me tell you exactly how I make them, because it is genuinely something you can do at your own kitchen table this weekend, sitting down with your hands, the way people have done for centuries. You need 3 things. Dry powdered clay, which you can find cheaply at any garden center or pottery supply, the reddish or brown kind. You need a little compost or good soil, and you need your seed. For a lawn, I use a mix of zoysia or whatever hardy grass suits my region, and I always add white clover, the very plant they told us to hate, because it will feed the soil for free for years to come. The old recipe is roughly 5 parts dry clay to 3 parts compost to 1 part seed. You mix the dry ingredients together first in a bowl. Then you add water, just a little at a time, until it all holds together like bread dough or thick cookie dough. Then you pinch off a small piece and roll it between your palms into a ball about the size of a marble. You set them on a tray to dry for a day or 2 until they're hard. And that's it. That's the whole thing. A child could do it. Someone with stiff hands and tired knees can do it sitting in a chair on the porch. When they're dry, you walk out to your bare patches and you simply toss them, scattering them across the ground, a few per square foot. You don't bury them. You don't cover them. You leave them sitting right on the surface, exactly like a seed that fell from a plant on its own. Then you walk away and let it rain. The best time is just before your wet season, in spring or in autumn, when the rain will come naturally and do your watering for you. I remember the first time I did this. I felt absolutely certain it wouldn't work. It seemed too easy, too lazy, too good to be true. After all those years of struggle, I scattered my little balls over a dead compacted strip along my driveway, the worst soil I had, ground so hard you couldn't push a finger into it. And I waited. For weeks, nothing. I nearly gave up. Then the autumn rains came, and one morning I walked out with my coffee and saw the faintest green haze across that dead strip. The clover came first, soft and round, and then the grass threaded up between it, and by the following summer that strip was the greenest part of my entire yard. I had not watered it once. I had not fertilized it once. I had not dug a single hole. And here is why it keeps working after that first year. Here is the part that closes the loop on everything I've told you. The clover among the grass keeps pulling nitrogen out of the air and feeding it into the soil, so you never need a bag of fertilizer again. The clippings you leave behind keep feeding the surface. The taller grass shades the ground and keeps the water in. The underground fungi, no longer poison, rebuild their hidden network and carry water to the roots through the dry months. The whole system becomes a partnership that feeds itself, exactly the way that temple garden in Kyoto has fed itself since the year 1339, exactly the way Fukuoka's fields fed themselves for 50 years, while the farms around him grew weaker and more dependent. That temple, by the way, is called Saihoji, though most people know it as Kokedera, the moss temple. More than 100 kinds of moss carpet the ground there in a green so deep it looks like velvet, and nobody planted it on purpose. The monks simply stopped fighting the land, and the land gave them one of the most beautiful gardens in the world for free. That is the whole philosophy, standing right there for almost 700 years, proving every single day that the less we interfere, the more nature gives. I think about how close all of this came to being lost completely. A handful of monks, an old farmer on a hillside, a few stubborn families who never stopped doing it the old way. The knowledge survived in the corners while the rest of us were taught to spray and bag and buy. And now it's in your hands, sitting at your kitchen table, in a bowl of clay and seed and a little compost. You're holding something they spent decades trying to make you forget. So let me leave you with the heart of it, the thing I most want you to carry away. For 30 years, I believed my lawn needed me to rescue it, when all along it needed me to trust it. We were sold the idea that nature is broken and only a product can fix it, and we paid for that idea with our money, our weekends, and our aching backs, year after year after year. The truth is gentler and it is free. The ground knows what to do. It always has. I think you already sense this, somewhere deep down. I think you are the kind of person who has felt for a long time that the simplest, most honest answer was being kept just out of reach, hidden behind a bag with a price tag on it. You were right. You were right all along. So tell me something, and I really do want to know. When you were a child, do you remember clover in the lawn and bees humming in it on a warm afternoon before someone told us it was a weed? Or tell me this instead, where in the world are you watching me from? And what does your own piece of ground look like right now? Leave me a comment and tell me, because I read them. And I love hearing from the people who are remembering all of this alongside me. If something in you stirred while I was talking, if you felt that quiet recognition that real knowledge has been pushed aside so someone else could keep selling us the cure, then come and stand with us. Subscribe and join the people who are quietly recovering what was almost buried, one old method at a time. Because next time I'm going to show you the Japanese way of growing more food in a tiny backyard space than most people grow in a plot 10 times the size, using a method an old woman taught me that hasn't changed in 400 years. You won't believe how little room it takes. I'll see you there, and until then, stop fighting your soil and let it show you what it can do. And one more thing before you go, because I don't want you to leave with any doubt holding you back. You do not need a perfect yard to begin. You do not need young knees, deep pockets, or a single new tool. Start with one bare patch, one bowl of clay, one handful of seed this weekend. Watch what the rain does. Let that small green miracle convince you the way it convinced me, and then come back and tell me how it felt to do less and receive more. That is the gift the Japanese kept alive, and now it truly belongs to you. You and I covered the overview, but I didn't get to show you the full Japanese lawn method step by step. Inside my membership, the circle, you get exactly that, picking up right where we stopped. Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't be alone. You'll belong here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click. If this helped your lawn, do subscribe and stay with me here. I have many more simple, gentle Japanese methods to share, and they are all waiting for you right here.